Let's start with the late 1800s, which is when it started getting more involved with police work. There's Alphonse Bertillon, and there had to be a way of identifying somebody. Was this a repeat offender? Somebody who have in jail? Did he do the crime before? How do you know? I mean, someone claimed it looked like him, but is that good enough? So his idea was to take specific measurements. Here you have numbers, and the numbers aren't going to change. And the numbers are going to be easy to identify a person with. All different parts of the body, I think 15, whatever many he did. Here's measuring the ear, and he measured the temple. Here's the arm. If you find someone in prison, or you find a suspect, and you measure all these things, and they're all exactly the same, it's very likely you've got the same person. Because probability everyone has the same ear is not so probable, but you combine all three, then it's almost positive that it's the same person. That's what he did. That's how he was able to identify people, by many, many different measurements. Later on, they just choose fingerprints because everyone can be identified by their fingerprint. Everyone's fingerprint is different. Okay, then getting to the early 1900s, that was Francis Galton. He's the one that popularized and said that, yeah, you got to start using fingerprints. There was blood type that they used. This wasn't more to exonerate people. Let's say they knew the perpetrator had a certain blood type. They would check a suspect. If he didn't have the right blood type, then he was innocent. So it's not unique to a person. Later on, we used DNA, but that was the start of using blood. And when it comes to violent crimes, yeah, there's going to be blood. So we have a good source of any evidence that can be found. Calvin Goddard, he's the one that began the bullet analysis, where the bullet came from, identifying which gun the bullet came from. We can talk about that a little bit later, but when guns were used to kill people, it's the major forensic tool to find and prove people innocent or guilty of the gunshots and on the murders. Hans Gross, he published an important work that actually got a lot of this off the ground, that made people think very seriously about using forensics in order to prove guilt or innocence, instead of just relying entirely on witness testimony. There's Edmund Locard. He said that people should get crime laboratories for thorough analyses. And his idea was, if it was there, it left a trace. The perpetrator was there, the perpetrator must have left a trace, and you can find the perpetrator based on that. This is actually an idea that we use when it comes to DNA. If a person was there, he probably left his DNA there somewhere. Maybe a hair, or maybe something. That was his principle. So, a little off the time stream that we're talking about, but there were great detectives of the past. The greatest detective, he's famous, you've probably heard of him. His main time of activity was from 1881 to 1903. That's when he retired. I think he had maybe did a little bit of work after his retirement, but his major activities were done at this time. And he's famous. And here he is. Recognize him? The one and only Sherlock Holmes. Okay, he did use methods of forensics that were later on used in a more scientific way. Sherlock Holmes isn't with us today, but today there's somebody else. Now, there are good detectives and better detectives. This guy is known as the world's greatest detective. And he actually looked back at the techniques of Sherlock Holmes that he did in his books, and he analyzed those techniques, and this guy actually called Sherlock Holmes the world's greatest detective. Anyway, this person is known today as the world's greatest detective. And I actually have a video of him solving a crime from beginning to end. Here he is.
The police believe Penguin murdered Black Mask, but why would he send me here if he was the killer? It doesn't add up. This crime took place days ago. The fire and the exposure to the elements make identifying the victims difficult. The male victim is wearing a black mask, but I can't positively identify him as Roman Sionis without a DNA analysis, something I can't do in the field. I can identify the female victim based on her fingerprints. Tiffany Ambrose, Roman Sionis' girlfriend, or one of them at least. She was no angel, long list of priors, but nothing to indicate she was the target here. The fire spread as a result of a Molotov cocktail thrown into the room. It may have been intended to destroy evidence. The shallow trajectory of the bullet suggests the shooter could be someone of Penguin's height. but the grooves on the floor suggest that the victim was killed by someone leaning back in a chair. This bullet was fired from a revolver. Ballistics analysis indicates a low angle of trajectory. The shooter could have been someone of Penguin's height, but the pattern in the gunpowder residue suggests the bullet was actually fired by someone lying on the ground. These fingerprints are a match for the Penguin, but they're on top of the soot from the fire. The cops were right. Penguin was in the room, but these prints prove he was here after the murders were committed. If he didn't kill Black Mask, who did? The only thing I know for certain is that Tiffany's shooter was lying on the floor. But why? These white streaks are shoe polish. Whoever shot Tiffany was being dragged along the floor. Besides the victims, there were two other people in the room. Tiffany's shooter, and whoever was dragging the shooter. The location from which the male victim was shot may tell me more. The DNA here doesn't belong to either of the victims. Whose is it? The fight broke out when someone startled the shooter. It's not clear who won the fight. It could have been either one of them. I should review the evidence to see if I can learn anything more about either the intruder or the shooter. Fabric analysis indicates the intruder was wearing a white suit or sport jacket. This fabric swatch could help identify the intruder, but I still can't identify the male victim's shooter. There's one impact area I haven't checked for clues. This DNA is from the female victim. The level of oxidation suggests it's been here for several days. If I review the evidence, I may be able to find out what she was doing when she was attacked. She was sending text messages to Roman Sionis about someone named the Joker. Someone killed Black Mask, but this crime took place several days ago. And I saw Black Mask earlier tonight. The only answers I have raise more questions. Who is the Joker? Was he the killer here? Or is he one of the assassins? I have a body, an unknown shooter, and an unknown assailant who attacked the shooter. I need to match the DNA samples against the records in the National Criminal Database to identify who was in the room. Alfred, I have enough information to solve the Lacey Towers case. Here's what happened. Someone spooked Sionis' girlfriend, so he sent her to his safe house, which was anything but safe. Sionis showed up later, ready for trouble, and found it. Or so it seemed. Roman's always been paranoid. That's probably why he's lasted this long. He'd sent in a decoy, giving himself the element of surprise. But it wasn't enough. There was a fight. Sionis lost. The killer didn't hesitate to shoot the decoy, but he wanted Roman alive to access the cash stored at the Gotham Merchants Bank. With Sionis under control, all that remained was to tie up loose ends. But it wasn't the fire that killed Sionis' girlfriend. What kind of monster forces a man to kill the ones he loves? The Joker. He's the shadow I've been chasing. And now I know where he's going next. Gotham Merchants Bank.
Okay, that was interesting. You see how I use all kinds of modern techniques. DNA analysis, gunshot residue.